Okay, well, hello everybody. It's a pleasure for me being here today with you. Well, I hope this time that we are going to have together maybe enjoyable, right? And you can learn a lot about this topic, which is one of the most important topics nowadays, because it, as the introduction said, is not just an aspect of just women, right? It's also an aspect of human beings, are of human responsibility. Okay, so I really hope you enjoying this topic, and well, let's start in this way, this little conference that I have prepared for you. I will share my screen a little bit here so you can see my presentation. Please, someone tell me if you can see it well, if there's nothing wrong here.
Yes, sir. We have good visual.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, so let's begin. I want to start this little conference, this talk, giving you a speech, which is very important because this is it's the speech of a prisoner on a jail in the United States, which also explains a lot what this movement tries to change in the world, or to change in us, and it's in this way. This is the quote. It says, "I don't want to feel anymore as if I couldn't feel. I want to be able to cry for my dead sister. I want to have the capability to feel because I cannot see my mother. I don't want to feel anymore as a man who has no emotions. I want to feel as myself. I don't want to be afraid for being who I really am." Okay, right. So let's begin with this. This is a quote, okay, said by a prisoner, as I told you, on El Círculo. El Círculo is a special group, right, for prisoners in the United States on Folsom Jail, which is dedicated for letting them to talk about themselves, about their feelings, about what are they feeling there in the jail, what are they feeling in a society, because we can call that a society, we can call it a community, okay, which forces them to be violent, to be alpha men, if we can call them that way, right? That if you cannot go and punch the other guy, then you are nothing. And I want to start this little conference with this topic, because when we talk about gender equity, not equality, I have to mention that difference because it makes a difference. It's not a topic about just women versus men. It's a topic about violence, about who we are and what are we doing with our society, right? How we are letting violence to enter in this. In our hearts, in our minds, all right, and makes us to behave in some way with others that surround us, all right. So I want to start with that aspect. But first of all, I think that it's very important to clarify what is equality and what is equity. Now, this is a perfect image that many of you maybe have watched, I don't know, someday or anything. Okay, because it's very popular. You can find this in the internet and it's beautiful, right? So I don't want to spend a lot of time to explain the difference in this way. I mean, you have in there, right? The equality is something that gives you the tools, but gives you the tools not considering your abilities, your skills, your abilities, your capabilities, etc. Right? So according with that, it's obvious that in some way, some people are going to enjoy the moments better than others, right? On the other hand, equity is not that. Equity wants the real equality, right? Gives all the people the same exactly opportunities according with their necessities. So everybody can enjoy the same, right? The same point. Okay. Now, gender equity, as we define in that way, we have to first of all define what is this, or what is gender in this case. I don't want to touch it a lot also, but I want to mention it, all right? So gender, technically, is what we really are, who we choose to be, okay? And not just in a sexual way, but also in the way that you can identify on the society. What is your role, okay? What role are you going to play in this enormous theater, which is the world? So when we call about gender, we are not calling about a woman and a man. No, we are calling about who you choose to be. That is what we understand as gender. And that's why on the movement LGBTQ, it's a lot of letters, okay? Because that's why it says that initials includes a plus symbol, because it's not limited on that. It's limited on, it has no limits technically, right? It's until you want to go there. So that's what we have to start watching with that eyes, that thing, and as long or as soon as we can start doing that, okay, we are going to give one step more onto the respect for the others, not just for the decisions they took, but also by what they really are as people. So I want to touch a very popular terminology, right? These words that are so popular nowadays, which is feminism and sexism. Now, I set in parentheses here the word in Spanish that I'm not going to call because this is a BIS conference, but there's a little different on these words, right? The one in Spanish and the one in English. But technically, they have the same. They represent technically the same, right? But there are a small difference, which these ones I will invite you to investigate and to read about them, right? But well, let's touch this. What are them? What's feminism or sexism? Okay, first of all, popularly and on a bad view, all right, on a wrong view, okay, we can define them, or we can define the feminism and sexism as two forces, two movements that are continuously fighting each other, fighting each against the other. But the real thing is that it's not that, all right? One of them, it's not a movement, but it's a philosophy that have been on our minds for many, many, many years. I will say for millennials or centuries also. The other one, it's a movement, it's a force that is opposing to the first one. Okay, so we have to see it that way. One was already born many, many years ago. The other one is going to respond to that one because we are living on a world that requires to pay more attention on our feelings if we want to be happy people in our lives. So what we commonly define as feminism, or what you can find as feminism in social networks, is not exactly what you see there, because people will always tell you their perspective, their own perspective. And of course, perspectives are infinite. Every single person has a different perspective about a certain topic. So it's not just about that. It's much more about it. All the movements, all the march, all these people gathering on plazas and on parks, right, and fighting for their rights. That's what is the feminism, and that's what is not just this one, but also other movements here. So that's a very important aspect here. There are a lot of books that we can check in here, right, for about the topic and all of that. And I will invite you to read a little bit about this, because you will see that this is not a problem of men versus women, that women want to do the same that men do. It's not that. It's about to respect what we are, who we are, and give us the chance of being what we choose to be in that way. Independently, if it's a woman, if it's a man, if it's homosexual, a transsexual guy, whatever, doesn't matter. It's all about respecting for letting us to be happy. But well, this is not exactly the problem. Where's the problem? What's the genesis of this problem? So if this is the philosophy of gender equity, then why we are not respecting that? Why we are not achieving that goal of being a more united society? Well, we can answer that question with this little word, which is violence. And I want to set not an example, but a fact in this way in our minds today. Anytime that we see no gender equality, is a step backward or it's a step forward for allowing violence to get again into our lives. But what is it about? Why I'm touching that point? Why I'm calling this phenomenon in this speech? Well, it's very easy. I want you to have these definitions that I found about violence, and they say this: intentional action or omission which leads to a damage, transgresses a right, and looks for the submission or control of a victim. That's one of them. Second one, credible threat of the use of force or threat, or the real use of that force resulting in causing damage. And the other one is the damage may not just be physical. Well, this is more. This is not more a definition. It's like a review of this. The damage may not be physical, but psychological, sexual, or economic. Now, we already know that because we have taken a lot of courses or a lot of speeches about this, about violence against women, etc. But I want to say that this is the problem, because the cancer that if we can define it that way, that avoids us of getting the real gender equality, is a necessity that we have of exposing violence out of us. And unfortunately, we express violence on the way that we have learned on our childhood. And this starts being an infinite chain that keeps going with the next generation and with our children, with our sons, with our daughters, etc., etc. And it continues on an interminable loop in this way. Right, so what is this? The physical threat or the physical damage that we have always known, but it's also divided into different ways. The ways that we can define it is direct and indirect violence. Now we have to see first that first of all, which this one talks about physical damage. The physical damage that we already know, you can see there is the first image. That's nothing that we are that we don't know, that we have already known for this. But the other ones are very interesting. In this way, the indirect violence, right, which can also be subdivided into structural and cultural. Now, this is very interesting because knowing from where the violence comes, we will see why we cannot get totally into the gender equity, but more, what is the first step that we have to to make the gender equity. Now, it's very interesting. The structural, we can find structural, we can consider it as the normally cultural. That structural violence is that negates you the rights, the elemental rights, or your basic necessities. In this one, there's no justice. We can find just that we are taking advantage over other people because we consider that their rights are not enough, are not that or rights are, for example, superior, theirs are not enough good or whatever. Okay, there's no justice. Okay, so there's an exploding of these people in that way. So this is an example because we have found on the recent cases in the United States that Black lives, with this movement of Black Lives Matter, that there's obviously an abuse of these rights for a specific amount of people. Now, the second one, which is a cultural, it's a more tiny, well, not tiny, it's huge, but it's not easy identified violence that we see day by day in our daily life. Okay, and this is one of the examples. Now, the cultural violence says apply unnecessary requirements for a specific purpose or because you consider that the rights of that person are not as well as yours. It's technically the same, but in a different way. It's applied in a different way. So until the moment that we are not understanding this, what are these? What's the definition of these kind of violences? We are not going to be able to go forward in this movement, in this progression, this progressive movement. Okay, and we are not going to heal our society. So the first thing that we have to do is to understand why we are behaving like this. Now, here's a perfect example. Maybe some of you identify this cartoon. Okay, it's an adult cartoon. Okay, first of all, I have to say that. But it's bright because many chapters of this TV show shows us the real illness of the society. What's wrong with the society? All right, and this episode is perfect. It's from I don't know, I remember exactly, but it's like about the 21st season. I don't remember well, but it's cool because in this is a perfect example of how society applies a cultural violence versus women, against women. Sorry. Okay. In the context, in this episode, the kids are playing Dungeons and Dragons, a popular game. All right. And the girls want to play with them, but when they come to the room to play with the kids, with the boys, right? They start to giving them excuses by telling them that they cannot play because their set is not complete, because their characters are not painted, because the little figures are incorrect, etc., etc. But the girls are all the time. How can I say it? Well, are all the time complaining with all the requirements that they set there, right? So that's a perfect example of gender inequity in this case, and not just that, but also cultural violence, because it's not easy to see this kind of violence, but it's there. And I want to finish this exposition with this phrase, all right, with this quote, which says, "Childhood is fate." We actually, in psychology, we say this a lot, that childhood is fate, because as the way that you were raised by your parents, by your childhood, is a way as by which many of your decisions are going to be taken in your life. But that's not totally, okay, an excuse. It's your responsibility for changing that. Yeah, well, I had not the best. I didn't have the best education, or maybe my parents weren't there for me all the time and all of that. Okay, yes, I have a serious damage on my feelings, on my history. Yeah, but that's not the excuse for behaving or for continuing with the loop of violence over and over and over again. Because what we are going to do at the end is just to provoke or to cause that this stays, and our society, it will be impossible for our society to heal well. So at the end, this is like a jail. The violence is a jail. Now, the problem is not the gender equity. The problem is that the violence which generates it's the jail that takes us in a dark place all the time, blind, ignoring others' feelings and ignoring others' rights and the empathy. And that's it. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank Mr. Felix for giving us this wonderful information about gender equality. Obviously, like he said, this is one of the key aspects in our current age and how we are fighting to have this equality between people. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. It's a pleasure.
How are you feeling, guys, so far in this first international forum amongst the universities? Without a doubt, it has been very insightful, and a lot of information that has been given we can surely apply to. Now, to continue with this, let's emphasize the fact that we are, in fact, in an international forum. Por lo tanto, la siguiente participación será llevada a cabo en español. Dime cómo hacer una cosa y lo olvidaré. Enséñame y puede que lo recuerde. Involúcrame y aprenderé. La siguiente participación trata de la inclusión. Y en esta ocasión escucharemos a Suine Omar Guillén Díaz, quien estará hablando de este tan importante tema. Pero antes de hacerlo, vamos a ver un pequeño video para la introducción de este orador. Mr. Felix, could you please make me host so I can share the video? The full name, Heriberto Alvarado Salas. Mr. Daniel, I don't know